It's a great privilege and honor for me to speak today to such a distinguished audience on a symposium commemorated to Martin Roth, whom I met first in 2004 and who since that and till last year was establishing some principal guidelines for me and for what I and many of my Russian colleagues were doing. Our world today has a very strong tendency for focusing on borders and walls and much less on building bridges. Countries and people who considered themselves part of one human world are more and more inclined to follow the concept of separation versus unification. From one point of view, it is a reaction to aggressive globalism, and we see that specific and national is in danger in many places in the world. But we also see a very dangerous tendency to turn national into nationalistic and consider local and narrow understanding of national as the only way to look at the world, alienating and excluding everything which is different in the wide sense of that word. In this current situation, museums and culture in general can play and really play the most important role changing minds of those who had started or can start voting for erecting walls, a concept so much opposed to the earlier ideas of what was once called by General de Gaulle United States of Europe. Today, many feel uncertainty and start looking for values which could work as one of the means of salvation. Some find it in nationalism, voting for separation, and rather false understanding of exclusiveness of their historical destiny and heritage. Some are coming back to us in search of eternal and thus universally important. Culture and museums in particular can work today as one of the means of salvation of the human and humanistic. There is no doubt about that. Museums exhibiting cultural heritage, national and international, present today a very diversified picture of the world and are collections of artifacts which do not lie. We are all trying to be as objective, professionals, are trying to be as objective and as politically correct as possible, understanding very well that messages we convey can strongly influence people's minds, and there exist today developed technologies of conscious and malicious manipulation of human consciousness. But contrary to manipulated statements, messages which museums can convey are messages based on originals, which can speak to the public from themselves, and our task is just to make their real voice heard. Museums today create very strong and at the same time intellectually and visually very attractive arguments, which are mighty counterpart to all types of historical, political manipulations. Contemporary museums which today think about the audience, about working out a new language, about new ways of conveying messages to the widest range of people, are becoming very engaging places to come to. And here, Martin Roth did with his activities something which hardly can be compared to what many museum directors had accomplished. Museums do not anymore limit themselves to a little bit boring exposure of the artifacts. In their permanent galleries and in temporary exhibitions, museums create a performance of images, sounds, music, written and heard messages, moving images, evolving thoughts, bringing a wide range of emotions, causing catharsis, really finally bringing into life Wagnerian concept of Gesamtkunstwerk. That is what we are aiming at, and our current experience, fantastic results, which we all witness, full exhibition galleries, long queues for most popular shows, hundreds of thousands of young people coming to museums, confirm that museums can accomplish a lot. We see that when our public is exposed to different kinds of art, to the variety of artistic positions and statements reflecting the polyphony of the world, they start to hear and accept different voices. And then it will be quite complicated to convince these people that different means hostile. As a director of the principal museum holding collection of Russian art from the 11th to the 21st centuries, I thought a lot about what constitutes the Russianness of Russian art, referring to the famous title of Nicholas Pevsner's book about the Britishness of British art. How should we show national art? In this sense, I always refer to famous works from Dostoevsky's speech at the opening of Alexander Pushkin's monument in Moscow in 1881. When describing uniqueness of Pushkin's talent, he spoke about universal responsiveness of Russian genius, meaning incredible openness of Russian culture to the world's greatest artistic achievements and simultaneous ability to create absolutely new language, new imagery of its own. And thus we are trying to present Russian art in its complexity, showing different phenomena from Valentin Serov with almost 500,000 visitors, or Ayvazovsky, 600,000 visitors in 3 months, a Guinness Book of Record for any of Russian museums in 2015 and 2016, to Lisitsky, Kabakov, and Larionov this year. And we are not limiting ourselves only to showing Russian art and Russian artists. The more you show national next to international context, the deeper is the understanding of its achievements and variety of existing artistic solutions. And with above-mentioned exhibitions, we have for the first time made national art as attractive or even more attractive than famous international names, and at the same time we were showing Russian art not as something separated from the world artistic development, but as integrating them, openly speaking about references, influences, but focusing on the specific of what Russian creative genius had produced. We have presented in our museum during the last years several very important exhibitions from European museums. Unfortunately, America is closed to us and we cannot come with our exhibitions to America due to a silly juridical case. We showed British portraits from the National Portrait Gallery. We showed the first in Russia retrospective of Giorgio de Chirico, are planning big exhibitions of Edvard Munch or Axel Gallen-Kallela, cooperating with Pompidou and the Tate, working on mutual exhibition programs with German museums like State Museums of Dresden or National Gallery. And I want to refer to the most successful of the shows which we brought to our museum in recent years. These were 42 masterpieces from the collection of Pinakothek of the Vatican, but not only from the collections, from the walls of the permanent galleries of the Vatican Museum. This exhibition presented the most important works from the collection of this distinguished museum, dating from the 11th to the 18th century. It was the most in-demand show at the Tretyakov in its history, and on the black market, the tickets were sold up to 25 times higher than the nominal price. But the most important outcome of this exhibition were not hundreds of thousands of visitors. It was a deep understanding by Russian audience of common Byzantine roots of both Catholic and Orthodox world, notwithstanding a thousand-year clash, when during that clash Russians and even Russian Tsars preferred to establish alliance with the Ottoman Muslim Turkey than to be an ally of the Catholic world. It was an incredible emotional response to the greatest creations by Bellini, Raphael, Caravaggio, and Poussin, commissioned by Catholic Church. This exhibition was a very important step in bringing both branches of Christianity closer to each other, and for the understanding for the Russian Orthodox that there is no gap, border, or wall between Catholic and Orthodox faith. In this sense, a metaphoric bridge is a very important one. We are indeed building bridges, and I would like to quote our president when he was talking last fall at St. Petersburg Cultural Forum. He said that both politicians and us museum workers and those who work in the field of culture are dealing with the same issue, the bridges. Politicians are burning them down, and we are re-erecting them anew. And after that, politicians are burning them down again, und so weiter. At that time, when walls and borders start to be erected and when bridges are being burned down, the voice of the museum world can be very strong, telling people that however different they are, there are much more similarities in the way they think and create than differences. I cannot resist the temptation to refer to the recently opened permanent exhibition at Louvre, Abu Dhabi. Having at their disposal collections from many of the French museums, starting with the Louvre and ending up with Pompidou, curators managed to create for the first time a unique picture of world's artistic development as a single whole, putting next to each other objects from different countries and continents representing different religions and faiths. Impression is overwhelming. Everybody understands that we are descendants and parts of the common world. The voice of original artifacts tells objective story of the development of the universe and presents the history of each nation and civilization as a very specific one. This is a message which we need to hear now, and museums can convey it better than anybody else and in a very democratic way, and sincere, I must add. At the time when separation becomes a ruling tendency, it is very important for all intellectuals and people with ability to think and to analyze, to intensify our contacts and expose our national cultures to each other. Cultural exchange nowadays can turn down false opinions and images of the other as a potential enemy. This will prevent from the further alienation between the people, nations, and countries, so that when the time will come for the voice of reason to prevail in politics, we would have already planted our garden, quoting Voltaire. We are really building bridges, and that was what Martin Roth was working on his whole life long, never giving up. Taking walls down, erecting bridges, connecting people, convincing them, creating new concepts, realizing them with incredible intensity. That was him, and we will try to go on straight in that direction. Thank you.